Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Faster Way podcast. I am here with my good friend, Jordan Rubin, and we are going to be discussing his brand new book, The Biblio Diet. I cannot wait to hear about this book. You've teased it a little bit with me in conversation over the past few months, Jordan, and I'm so intrigued. But before we dive into the details of your book, I want to hear when and why you entered into the wellness space. Take us all the way back, Jordan, all the way back, and tell us when and why you entered into the wellness industry.
Amanda, you don't know this, but I was born into the wellness industry. So you wanted me to go way back. So 50, a score and 50 years ago, but I was born at a naturopathic university in Oregon. My dad is a chiropractor, a naturopathic doctor. So I was one of the weird kids that ate what we called natural foods in the 70s and 80s, much to the chagrin of little grade school Jordy Rubin bringing his 17 grain bread and tofu based turkey and all the nasty stuff. Amanda, people don't realize how cool it is to be healthy and organic these days and how ostracized those of us who were kids of pioneers felt. So I really was born into it, Amanda, but like many children who are privileged to have an amazing family or message or something, I didn't appreciate it. So I ate junk whenever I left the house and was very healthy as a teenager until I wasn't. So at 18 years of age, I came down with digestive health symptoms that would later be diagnosed as Crohn's colitis. I lost over 80 pounds, went down to 104 pounds in a wheelchair. And before that, Amanda, I was kind of this fun, happy, life of the party, but yet very conservative, God fearing young teenager. But I just loved life. And then I went from that to being trapped in a prison that was my own body. I was a skeleton. I looked like a concentration camp survivor, as people would
Mm.
say. And inside, I felt like everything I cared about was gone. And this was a 2 year journey. I visited 69 medical experts. And by the way, if you break your arm or if you've got a disease that is more noble, that's one thing. But when you're 19 and your friends ask what's wrong and you say, I have bloody diarrhea 18 times a day, like I can't
Oof.
explain how bad it was. Now, I knew during my illness, even though I lost my college experience, I was away from my friends. I didn't want anyone to see me. I was being taken care of by my parents in their home like an infant. It was horrible. But I knew that this illness couldn't just be something I was dealing with. I now knew what it was like to lose my health. And I said, God, if you heal me and I can help just one person overcome disease or better yet, avoid it, I'm going to spend the rest of my life sharing that message. Now, Amanda, thank God that the venous flytrap infusions from Germany, or the fetal sheep cell injections from England, or the liquid herbs that an herbalist told me came from Mars were not what helped me. And I'm not joking. There's no end to the crazy, zany, and I would say life threatening treatments we can undergo. But what got me well was I met a man through my dad who told me if I follow a diet and lifestyle based on the Bible, I can be healed.
Mm.
And because of my faith and because of my promise to God, this made perfect sense. I also, at my lowest low, had this little gift of faith from God that allowed me to ask my mom to take my photograph. We call that the before picture. If you search online for my name, you'll find either me or the Jordan Rubin that writes horror films. My kids refer to him as the bad Jordan Rubin, and I'm sure his kids refer to me as the weird Jordan Rubin. So kind of have that deal going. So, Amanda, I went to California in a wheelchair. I grew up in South Florida, not so far from where you are part of the time. And I went in a wheelchair, but I knew I was going to get well. I knew that God's plan for me involved healing and sharing the message with others. And in 40 days, I went from death to life. I was back, except I wasn't. I was empowered with a new vision to see the health of God's people transformed one life at a time. However, being 21, the only way I could share that message was work at a health food store stocking chips and beans. But I had that little, at the time, photocopy, and I have to explain. I don't know if you deal with this, Amanda, because you're so much younger than me, but I explain to people what a photocopy is and my kids what good music and good movies are from the 80s. But so I would show people this amazing testimony when I was working at the health food store, and I would recommend supplements and foods and books and skincare. I'd see results, and I knew that $4.35 an hour wasn't going to make me wealthy, but my calling was to help people. And over time, through starting companies and writing books, I've been able to do that. And I just celebrated my 50th birthday. So the way I see it, I'm like 40% through my journey. And so I am really excited that the world is actually ready to hear the message now. I feel like there's some wind behind me as opposed to opposition. And just to know that there's an audience like yours that are primarily God fearing, faith based women who want to be healthy for themselves, their family. I just love it. And that is a part of what I want to do every day when I wake up. It's have God give me wisdom to help people like your audience get just a little bit better in their health and their life.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that story. And it is wild that it was 40 days from death to life in your words. Tell me a little bit about the Maker's Diet because that was a book you launched many years ago and it went in today's terms viral. And many of our listeners have heard of that book. They've read that book. Maybe they even did a book study at their church with the Maker's Diet. So tell us just a little bit about that before we dive into the new book, The Biblio Diet.
The Maker's Diet was really an encapsulation of the 40-day, I call it health experience that I undertook when I was in San Diego, California. It was kind of like me, an old motorhome, and illegally parking on the beach. Now, I got to tell you, it was challenging because I was still sick and getting well, but being by yourself, reliving your life, and knowing where you believe God can take you and dreaming, it's a pretty cool thing. And I don't have a chance to do it often. So I'll really appreciate that. But I started learning, Amanda, how to eat real food. Now, I had already been treated by some of the world's top doctors. I tried a vegan diet. I tried an all meat diet. I tried a crazy food combining diet. I tried macrobiotics, which barely exists anymore, but man, is it not tasty. So I was not eating junk food, taking pharmaceuticals. I had already tried everything, but I ended up learning that real food, the way God created from his word, included healthy dairy, included healthy meat, included healthy grains, if you could believe that. Jesus was called the bread of life, after all. We'll get into that in a moment. So I learned how to eat the real food or whole food way. I learned about a powerful probiotic substance after over 30 different products failed. This one that, believe it or not, came from the soil along with my diet helped me. I understood that imagination and faith are one and the same. And I had to start thinking about and meditating on what I wanted, not what I feared. I started speaking differently. It was a wholesale makeover, and the Maker's Diet shares those principles along with helping people understand the dangerous three I's: infection, insulin, and inflammation. Now, by the way,
Mm.
insulin's not dangerous, elevated insulin is. Inflammation's not dangerous, elevated inflammation is. But I started to lay out a framework that you can reduce infection, reduce inflammation, and balance insulin with the three-phase Maker's Diet approach. And it was before social media. And Amanda, interestingly enough, I learned about a month ago that my main audience right now on TBN and QVC are 75 to 90-year-old women. So I realized I needed to start getting out there more. So as you pointed out off the air, I am tiptoeing into social media as well. So you might see some of my stories, and I didn't even mention this, but it's in the Biblio Diet book, Amanda. After being healed from Crohn's disease, I later was diagnosed with terminal cancer in
Mm.
2008. God healed me from that without conventional treatments. That's going to be discussed in the Biblio Diet for the very first time in print. And so I have a real passion and mission to see people who are desperate, who have been cast off by their doctors, who have unexplained illnesses, or worse, an illness that doctors explain will take your life in 6 months. I want to be a ambassador of health, but more importantly, an ambassador of hope.
Oh, an ambassador of hope and health. That's incredible. And by the way, you didn't tiptoe into social media. You dove right into the deep end on Instagram. You already have over 60,000 followers in probably less than a month. So everyone needs to go and follow you and find you online, Jordan Rubin. Let's discuss the Biblio Diet. You've teased it a little bit with me in conversation, and I'm so intrigued. What is the Biblio Diet about, and what makes it really unique from other diets out there?
Well, Amanda, first and foremost, the Biblio Diet has a very bold promise, and I'll say, fortunately, was allowed to be shared based on the publisher because, as you probably know, certain people like to censor you, but we like to say
Mhm.
the Biblio Diet can help you live long, master metabolism, reduce pain, fight depression, and conquer cancer with healing secrets from the Bible. Now,
Wow.
what's interesting is I read the Bible every day, and I've read through the Bible umpteen times, whatever that means. And still, and I'm talking last week, God will provide fresh revelation. You would think I would have read every verse about food or health or wellness, but these 66 books that we call the Bible are an unending treasure trove of information. So I wrote The Maker's Diet 22 years ago. So hard to believe. And since then, God has shared with me very unique revelations, which we can touch on. One, I would call the wisest meal on earth, which will tell you probably what we should be eating. And Amanda, I'll give you a little secret. Some of your audience might be slightly frustrated, maybe even offended because certain people avoid certain things. But I try to find truth in anything the Bible recommends because it trumps medicine, it trumps wisdom and knowledge of man. So that's one. Number two, I believe that God has revealed to me the greatest healing secret in scripture in two different verses. And I didn't just read it and internalize it. I'm consuming it and I'm going to share it with the world. Apart from that, I really unpack how modern science and what we call, I'll say, modern wisdom, especially with today's very important Maha movement, et cetera, we're hearing more about toxins in the environment, microplastics, forever chemicals, endocrine disruptors. We're hearing about the dangerous effects of what you would call plant or processed seed oils. Now, I've been talking about some of those for a long time, but I give the foundation of why to avoid certain things, what to replace them with. And when it comes to eating, if you want to eat the Biblio way, or what would be called eating by the book, I don't just tell you to avoid things or eat certain foods. I give you the best versions of each and ways to consume them, even if you've been unable to in the past, or if the diet dogma of the day, I guess that's alliteration, would tell you not to. So I know that that's pretty vague, Amanda, but I'm ready to jump in at any point. I think the Biblio Diet has been in its pre-launch successful because we have struck a nerve with certain people because I'm telling people today, whether you're a paleo dieter or a carnivore dieter, pork and shellfish was outlawed by God, not because of kosher, but because of physiology and anatomy. I tell people
Mhm.
that dairy is good if you consume the right kind. And by the way, King Solomon, the wisest and richest man in history, ate bread and meat every day. And I don't know of another diet that recommends both. So we're trying to get in people's face with some biblical 411, if you know what I mean.
Ooh, ooh, I love it. Okay, let's dive in. We're not going to share all of the content of the book because, of course, we want to go and read it and we don't have time. But let's dive into dairy because at the faster way, I often say raw dairy is not the issue, but the gross manipulation of our foods and the processed dairies that so many people grab and go, the string cheese, the Yoplait yogurt, you name it, that's really what causes inflammation and sensitivities and issues. And so we encourage clients to go without dairy for 6 weeks. But again, raw dairy is not the issue. It's the gross manipulation of foods and the processing. So dive into dairy because not only do you believe in dairy, you were healed by dairy. And so tell us more about that.
Yes, and not only was I healed by dairy, but because I was, Amanda, I became a dairy farmer, among other things. And so we raise livestock, and I know a lot about dairy. So I give a dairy hierarchy. But before I do, Amanda, dairy is part of a healthy diet. It was what nourished Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were shepherds. We know that the land of milk and honey was the promised land. And this new revelation that I received from one of the oldest men in history in the Bible, Job, talked about his prime of life when he was celebrated, wealthy, had an amazing family. And it says from his words, talking to God, when I was in my prime, the streets flowed with cream and the rocks poured out olive oil. You know what that tells me? We need to consume cream and olive oil in our diet, and I do almost every day. But you nailed it on the head, Amanda. Dairy falls into, I would say, both principles that overarch the Biblio diet. Eat what God created for food and eat food in a form that is healthy for the body. Dairy can be healthy, but not if it's pasteurized, homogenized, coming from livestock that were injected with chemicals, fed garbage, and animals that were treated poorly, confined, and then synthetic vitamins added back. And worst of all, you take the best part of the milk off, the fat, the cream, and you make it non fat. So that's the worst dairy and one of the worst things you can consume. But on the top end, and we talk about this, we give you a stepping stone of dairy: raw, grass fed, organic. A2 dairy can be amazing. And if you don't know what that is, A2 dairy is what mother's milk contains. A1 dairy, I like to say, is what the Chick-fil-A cow's milk contains. Now, that's nothing against Chick-fil-A. They don't even use cows or produce milk. It's just their marketing campaigns. I do have some things against Chick-fil-A in what they serve, but not their corporate. You know what I mean, Amanda. But
Yes.
if you consume dairy that is cultured or fermented, like yogurt or kefir, A2, which is something available in grocery stores, club stores, health food stores. If you have dairy intolerance, you can consume yogurt or kefir and probably digest it. What I don't want is for women, especially, to avoid dairy for the sake of avoiding dairy. It is worth the work to find healthy dairy near you. And if you can't tolerate fluid dairy or ice cream, try some butter or ghee. Those are excellent sources of fat and fat soluble vitamins. Again, if milk and honey represents the promised land, I don't know how we shouldn't try to find the best versions of those. And again, we are very practical. We help you level up your dairy and your bread and your meat and all those other categories, and hopefully level down some of the things God calls detestable.
Yeah, I've told you multiple times in Costa Rica, I am fine eating dairy. I have cheese quite often, but there are also different cows in Costa Rica. And so you're talking about not only is it not pasteurized and we don't want to, be getting dairy from the US Publix or the Kroger's that is coming from cows that are mistreated and mishandled and given all of these different, antibiotics and chemicals and da da da. Like it kind of passes the common sense test that that wouldn't be a good option. Uh, However, if we can find the right dairy, are there also gut benefits to the right dairy, would you say as well?
There are bone benefits, gut benefits, muscle benefits. It really is one of the easiest ways to get in protein for adults and children. Great for a smoothie base, great for a snack. And to your point, I just love it. And I've been consuming it for a long time. And to your other point, Amanda, my week-long trip to Costa Rica saw us getting raw dairy from a local farmer every morning. And it wasn't just milk. We had so much raw dairy goodness. It was amazing. And yes, Costa Rica has the native cows that would be called zebu or humped cattle, like think an American Brahmin or an Indian Gyr cow. Those are the kind of cows we have. We also have water buffalo on our farms. And in Costa Rica, because of the climate, those type of cattle flourish, and they are all of the A2 genetics. So you'll enjoy cheese, yogurt, and other forms of dairy when you thought you couldn't. But best of all, Amanda, A2 dairy is now available everywhere in the United States. all across the dairy spectrum. You just have to do a little bit of research, but people are coming around. And if you're wondering what's so bad about A1 dairy, it's like gluten times 13, and it's
Oof.
been called the devil in the milk. So it really is not natural to the human body. But if you're up for dairy, A2 is a great way to go. And I really say the same thing about bread. White bread, I used to say this all the time, the whiter the bread, the sooner you're dead. That should
Oof.
be a reminder. But there is a healthy kind of bread. And in fact, I can't smell it all the way from here, but I may have a sourdough einkorn loaf of bread in the Dutch oven right now as we speak. It's not only become a fun hobby, people are now thinking of their sourdough starter as a pet, but Amanda, the gluten that causes so many issues for people with thyroid dysfunction, gut, brain, that gluten and the associated anti-nutrients can largely be reduced through the ancient sourdough process, which I believe in the biblical times was the way bread was prepared and baked. It was these hard round loaves. They had to be, because when Jesus was tempted by the devil in the wilderness, Satan said, command these stones to become bread. Think of this, Amanda. Satan did that because Jesus was probably delirious from 40 days of fasting, and the stones looked like bread. Those hard, crusted, delicious sourdough or sprouted breads can be a part of a healthy diet. But if your gut is wrecked, if you have major issues with carb addiction, it is good occasionally or in the beginning of a program to go without consuming bread and maybe even dairy, because frankly, you're probably addicted to them because you consume them at every meal. But we want Amanda to know, we want your audience to know that some bread is horrible, and to make things worse, there's dough conditioners and additives and folic acid, which is made in a laboratory, that can screw people up with their methylation or lack of it. But there is a bread you can consume. Make it like a side dish, not the main thing you consume every day, but as a treat. It's amazing. Sourdough pizza crust is just the bomb with A2 cheese. So we do enjoy our food. I co-wrote this book with Dr. Josh Axe, your friend who introduced us. And
Mhm.
Josh and I are big time foodies, but we also know what it's like to care for patients who are the sickest of the sick. And my digestive issues were so bad, yet during my healing process, I consumed heirloom grain sourdough bread and raw dairy. So I'm a big believer.
Oof, I love it. Speak with me a little bit about those 2 verses you mentioned that you said gave you a revelation. I know a little bit because you teased me on it a few months ago, but what are those 2 verses and what was that revelation you had regarding nutrition?
Got it. Well, number one, First Kings chapter 4, starting in verse 22. And Amanda, I don't know about you, but some people find Kings and Chronicles and First and Second Samuel pretty tedious, but I am just loving it. Now, I've taken a big swing and a miss on trying to memorize all of David's three mighty men and 30 and all the different names, but the principles are powerful. And I was on the farm one day in Tennessee walking, and it dawned on me. I said, wait a minute. King Solomon had his daily meal outlined in the Bible. I remember listening to it on the app, and I went back and it said, King Solomon, and I want to give a preface, wisest man on earth, richest man on earth. All the kings of the earth went and sat at his feet. Everybody brought him gifts. He was so wealthy that gold and silver weren't even precious anymore in his time. And he knew everything about plants, animals, and humans. And he chose to eat every day and serve his court. I don't know how many they were. I wish I did, because then I would know how much we should eat every day. It says in First Kings chapter 4, verse 22, and Solomon's daily provisions were grass-fed beef. That's easy, right, Amanda? Our people all love that. Here's a tough one. Stall-fed cattle, which means not necessarily grain-fed, possibly. Could be hay-fed, but it says stall-fed cattle. Deer, roebuck, no problem. Choice fowl, we're all good. But then it said meal and flour, which means that Solomon every day consumed red meat and grains likely baked into bread.
Mhm.
And people flip out on this because of their paleo this and paleo that. Amanda, the Biblio Diet name came 15 years ago when a pastor friend of mine asked me to write a foreword to her health book, and she talked about the paleo diet. And I said, listen, I love you and I respect you. But let's not, as Christians, talk about the paleo diet, which means we came from Cro-Magnon man and hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. If we believe that humans are thousands of years old based on the Bible, and I'm not going to get into old earth, young earth, that may be for a different episode. I think we should not talk about paleo, even though the tenets of the diet can be good. Let's talk about a biblio diet. And 15 years later, here we are. However, paleo eaters don't like my grain recommendations. And I missed this, Amanda, during the maker's diet somehow. But I do believe that people can be healthy. Red meat is the biblical superfood. I believe bread is one too in the right form. After all, Jesus was referred to as the bread of life, the source of our strength. The high priests only ate meat and bread during their time being initiated for 7 days. And anytime anyone celebrated anything, they killed the fatted calf, which was a 4 to 6 year old intact bull, by the way. And then they would serve all these other cool cheeses and figs and raisins and pomegranate. But I believe if Solomon is the wisest man on the earth, which God said he is, we should understand that meat and bread can be healthy in the right forms. That's one.
Great. The wisest meal on earth. I love that. That is great. What is the second verse?
Okay, this is big because I practically have devoted my entire life to it since 2019. I got a lot of capacity. So you're probably saying, Jordan, I know that's not true because I talked to you about all kinds of other stuff. I have a lot of focus, but in 2019, God spoke to me through a prompting from my wife and direct scriptures from Ezekiel 47:12 and Revelation 22:2 that fruit tree leaves are for healing, medicine, and the way God spoke to me about it, an answer to cancer. And in the last 6 years, I have been quietly recommending this powerful message, which basically tells you that instead of consuming black, green, or white tea, if you can consume leaves from fruit trees, as discussed in Ezekiel 47:12 and Revelation 22:2, they will bring healing, or other translations in Hebrew, healing, medicine, or cure. And in Revelation in the Greek, healing of the nations, you can overcome 70 diseases at least that I've already studied, but probably the answer to metabolism, longevity, and more. Because Amanda, in Revelation 22:2, which is the last book and the last chapter of the Bible, it discusses the tree of life, which we found in the first chapter of the Bible. And if you listen sequentially or read it, Revelation 22 rolls right into Genesis 1. The tree of life was meant to give us longevity. It was meant to give us amazing health. And when we broke away through sin, God has been trying to reconnect us with eternity and the tree of life since that day. And I believe Ezekiel 47, Revelation 22, these are not allegories. I've proved it by consuming an infusion from fruit tree leaves, which, by the way, tastes just like tea. I've recommended it discreetly to a handful of people or a few handfuls, and we've had amazing testimonies that you're going to read about in the Biblio Diet. And also, Amanda, because the Biblio Diet is launching soon, not immediately, in a couple of weeks, anyone of your audience that wants to hear more about healing leaves, if you will go to thebibliodiet.com, I will give you a free chapter digitally of chapter 14, Healing Leaves, which will tell you what the science says, what the Bible says, how to make it yourself. And if you've got some adventurous people listening, Amanda, and you in Costa Rica, if whenever you're there, I'm going to give you a personal healing leaves recipe. You can forage for leaves with a simple herb finder or plant finder app. You can buy leaves through the mail or go to an herbal shop, combine them together, treat it like a tea, and you will experience amazing results. Caffeine free, by the way, not that I'm against caffeine, but these leaves contain polyphenols. They contain other antioxidants like flavonoids and flavanols. And anyone on the planet has access to leaves because it isn't just 12 certain leaves. If you're in Costa Rica, red fruit's great, mango's great, avocado's great. And you have all these other cool fruits like chocolate pudding fruit, and the list goes on. I was a fruit aholic in Costa Rica,
Me
although the
too.
beef's pretty darn good too.
Yeah.
And I've been eating plantains, Amanda, every day since I've been back, trying to find that Costa Rican vine ripened or tree ripened. And sadly, I'm falling short. But you can use any fruit tree leaves as long as there's a fruit or nut. And in combination, you will be so blessed with your health. And what I love about this, Amanda, it's not for the wealthy, it's not for the elite. The poorest nations in the world have fruit tree leaves that are falling off the trees that they could simply add to water and receive healing. So God didn't just give his answer to disease as a medicine that you can afford in the first, nation worlds or first world, or something from an Amazonian rainforest that is so rare. This is everywhere. And isn't it just like God to give us his greatest healing in a form that seems like trash or waste? So, yes, I'm a tree hugger, and I'm going to devote the rest of my life, Amanda, to getting this message out. In fact, just this morning, I was bagging up some leaves from my farms to send to a couple of folks around the country who are suffering. And by the way, I didn't just read the verse and listen. I planted 600,000 fruit trees on my farms. And anyone who goes gets to pick whatever leaves they want free of charge. It's a privilege to play a role in someone's healing.
Oh, wow. Incredible. Share with us the website one more time if we want to download that chapter and learn more about how to buy the book.
Absolutely. Thebibliodiet.com. And then I believe, Amanda, although I have to check, that on my Instagram, there's that link tree that should
Yes.
also have the book. So, yes, it's Jordan S. Rubin. Make sure to have the S there unless you want to learn about horror films. That other Jordan Rubin probably hates that I'm bashing him. But anyway, we don't get to own our name in the domain. But Amanda, I'm really excited, not only because your audience is so faithful, and I mean that as a double entendre, but they're also usually the health bearer of their family. They're tasked with keeping oftentimes their husband in check when it comes to eating, certainly their kids. And in some cases, more mature women get to sow the seeds of good health into their adult children and grandchildren. So, what the Biblio Diet will do, it will give you a resource how to eat and live God's way, and how to have a conversation with someone who thinks that a certain influencer or doctor created the health movement. And I love what Secretary Kennedy's doing and a lot of our friends, but God created us to be healthy. These are his principles. And my goal with the Biblio Diet is to see him glorified, because he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And he wants us to live long and live well.
Oh, Jordan, thank you so much for taking the time to share about your book. I cannot wait to get my hands on it. Everyone listening is going to go to thebibliodiet.com as well to get their hands on it. We just truly appreciate you taking the time, and I want to acknowledge you for all of the effort and the research and the passion that you've put into writing the book. I know that it is a huge feat to do that, and I'm sure you're excited, and this is going to be an incredible, incredible launch.
Yes, and I know that you have been famous for showing birth giving videos. So we're going to hopefully chronicle the birth giving of this book. In fact, Amanda, I told you this. I got the first copy. Oh, I can't see it with my little weird background, but anyway, if you could, there we
I
go.
see it.
The Biblio Diet.
Yay.
Yeah. So modern technology fails me again, but this has been it's been exciting, and I know that a new generation of men and women are going to be blessed by the book. So thank you, Amanda, for letting me share these principles, and for all that you do, because behind the scenes, we're doing some really cool stuff to make people very, very healthy, lean, and their best self.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And be sure that you check out the book. Bye, everyone.